Okay, so this is a translation and a discussion of Pliny's letter 1037 that obviously he is writing to the Emperor Trajan. So let's go ahead and get started. So in the nominative, obviously, Gaius Plinius, and then it's left off that S, which remember stands for salutum dicit, says greetings to the Imperator Trajan. And right off the bat, we have a vocative, Dominus, master, or lord, and so he is addressing him in that vocative case. So, oh Lord, O Emperor, the people who live in Nicomedia, the Nicomedenses, they have spent, and that's how we're translating this. And then we have this ginormous number that I'm not going to get into, but it's over 3 million, I think 3,318,000 sesterces. The unit of money used by the Romans, like for us is the dollar, for them is the sesterce, but I am in my translations going to use sesterce and dollar interchangeably, so please understand that if I say dollar, I mean the sesterce. So they have spent that on an aqueduct. An aqueduct, which, and you don't have to, but I'm going to understand that perfect passive participle, that perfect passive participle, and that perfect participle, all being bound to the S, allowing me to translate all three of them as though they were finite verbs. Otherwise, it would say, an aqueduct which, having been unfinished, still, having been neglected, and then make that a verb. But I'm going to make all of them a verb. So an aqueduct which has been unfinished, still, has been neglected, and even has been destroyed or destructed. It's falling apart, even though it is a recently built thing. And again, he then goes on to point out further, another additional $200,000 sesterces have been withdrawn, have been spent, as it were, but has been withdrawn onto another aqueduct. And so therefore we have the original aqueduct at $3 million, now we have a $200,000 aqueduct. And so he says, also, ablative absolute here, with this one, meaning the most recent one, the $200,000 aqueduct, having been left behind, having the work now obviously stopped, but with this one having been left behind, there is need. The idiom opus est translates there is need for a new expense. And then we have this purpose clause, so that they, those citizens, may have water. And so it is obviously the purpose of why you've got to have now another expense. They, those citizens, who have destroyed, but in this context, since we have money as the object, let's make this translation as not destroy, but more so wasted. And so those people who have wasted so much money, tam pecuniam, badly. And so therefore they have just been throwing money at the problem to seemingly no end. These aqueducts have become a money pit. And we're going to learn a little bit later in the letter as to what the issue is. Ipse, remember, is an intensifying demonstrative, and so here in the nominative singular masculine, it could be I myself, or you yourself, or he himself. You look to the verb to find out, and since it is per me, we now know that it is I myself. So I myself have arrived to a fountain, but more so in this context, it's going to mean like a spring, a source of water, and so to a most pure spring, a purissimum spring, out of which water seems to ought to be led. Remember, debeo debere means to owe or to ought, and so here we're going to be translating it as ought. And so, out of that spring, out of which water seems to ought to be led, a present passive infinitive, just like or as if it had been tried, it had been attempted, initio, in the beginning, with, here, an arched structure, an arched work, as it were, from that word opus operis, and then we figure out why with an arched structure, an arched work, so that not. Another purpose clause, but here a negative purpose clause, so using the ne instead of what we saw previously with the ut, with the subjunctive verb, and here the subjunctive verb is perveniat. Remember, we fear a giant liar. Fourth conjugation has the ia, and so you could either say so that not or lest. We're going to use lest. Lest it arrived, meaning that aqueduct, only to the level and low-lying, implies substantizing areas of the town, of the citizenry, of the whatever the place is, which obviously is Nicomedia. So, very few, pauki, paukai, pauka means few. It's where we get the English word paucity, and here it is in the superlative, so therefore very few arches still remain. And certain ones referring to those arches are able, another passive present infinitive, to be erected with squared stone. Stone having been squared, which has been drugged down ex superiore opere from the previous work, from the previous structure. And so, essentially, as often is the case, just like what we can do, is sometimes if you are tearing down a brick house, you can keep the bricks so that you don't have to buy brand new ones. And so therefore, we're going to learn that this is going to be very, very good in saving money and like. So, aliqua pars. A certain part, remember that aliquis is going to mean someone or anyone, so some part implied of that previous aqueduct. As it seems to me, here the ut, we do not translate it that or so that because we have a non-subjunctive verb. So when you do have a subjunctive verb like what we see here, it is going to be one of those ut clauses. But without a subjunctive, you will translate ut most of the time simply as. So some part of it, as it seems to me. And here we have the future passive periphrastic, and you look to see where the obligation is going to be made as far as time-wise by looking at the form of the verb to be. Because we have a future of the verb to be, ero, eris, erit, we need this obligation to be in the future, and there we express it in English as will have to be driven or built in this sense with brickwork. So testakeo, it means made of brick, and so I'm just translating it brickwork. And it, here referring to that brickwork, indeed or for, so let's go ahead and use for it, i.e. brickwork, and then we just imply an est, is both more easy, easier, and more cheap, because again you have to think of the nature of brick. Brick is made out of clay, clay is dirt, dirt is cheap. That's why we have the expression dirt cheap, and so therefore it's a win-win that you will have obviously here brickwork. As an aside, Roman bricks were really thin. They did not have the ability to fire bricks with the same sort of size that what we are able to now, and so their bricks are really more like tile. So their bricks weren't that great, but obviously it would serve the purpose here in this situation. Sed in primis, but first and foremost, that's what this expression means. First of all, it is necessary that, and so therefore, this expression that we have from here to here is essentially functioning as the subject. What is the thing which is necessary? The act of that right there accusative subject, or that right there accusative subject, be verbed. But we're going to translate it idiomatically, or I should say literally. But first and foremost, it is necessary that an aqueduct expert, that is what an aqualegum is, or an architect, be sent, another present passive infinitive, by you. And well, remember, is just the correlatives either or. And so he's asking, send us somebody, otherwise it wouldn't be any good like it was before. And so, but first of all, it's necessary that either an aqueduct expert or an architect be sent by you, lest, and so another negative purpose clause, lest again it come out, i.e. that the result of the structure, that it come out, which has happened. So in other words, they've had aqueduct A, they spent $3 million on. They had aqueduct B, they spent $200,000 on, and before aqueduct 3, or C, they're going to want, obviously, an expert from Rome to be sent, and so that's what he is asking of Trajan. I guarantee, I affirm, and the thing that I affirm is that one thing. It's more like this one thing, I guarantee this one thing, that both the utility of the work and the beauty of the work. So it's going to be good functioning, and it's also going to be good looking, he says. That stuff is, and the reason why I'm translating essay as is remember that affirmo is our introductory verb, and a present infinitive needs to occur at the same time. And so therefore, if it is present that I am affirming, it is going to be present that the utility and the beauty is, or both together, are not worthy, but most worthy. And remember that dignus, digna, dignum is going to require an ablative with it. And so therefore, that's what cyclotuo is or are most worthy of your age, of your era. And so he's telling Trajan, I guarantee it's going to look pretty good. So let's go ahead while we're at it and just grab the second one, that is the letter about the aqueduct, a different aqueduct, letter 1090, and have it all in this one recording. So again, we start out, Gaius Plinius says greetings to the Emperor Trajan. And again, start out with that vocative, master, Lord. Now, instead of the Nicomedeans, we have the people who live in Sinope. So the Sinopenses, they are lacking. When you have facio, facere, feci, factus, with a day on the front, it means to fail. Or in this sense, it means to lack. When you have day, with obviously sum esse in the forms therein, that is going to mean lack. But we're going to translate this one as lack as well. So they fail from water, they are lacking from water. They don't have water, they need it. Water, which seems, and again, videre, vidi, visus, in the passive is going to often mean seem, and so that's what we're translating it as here. Seems that water, both good and copious, abundant, seems able to be led from the 16th mile marker. So in other words, a place outside of town, about 16 miles away, there seems to be a good and abundant water source. And so therefore, he's going to make the suggestion, the people in Sinope need water. There is water 16 miles away. How are we going to get it there? Aqueduct. And that is exactly right, what comes up here. However, there is immediately from its head, so in other words, from the water source, by a little bit, ablative of degree of difference, more ample, more far away, and then we have exactly 1,000 paces from the head, there is a place. Having been, instead of suspected, I'm going to make it inspected. Having been inspected and soft. Soft as in, it's not too rocky, it's not a place in which you're going to have trouble building. A place which I, meanwhile, have ordered, to be explored in a moderate, or with a moderate expense. And so he's going to do a little bit of surveying, and so making sure that this place is going to be an ideal spot for construction. And so, again, there is, however, immediately from the head, a little bit more far, or I should say, more far by a little bit, 1,000 paces, so maybe a mile away, there is a place having been inspected and soft, which meanwhile I have ordered to be explored with moderate cost, whether. And here is introducing your indirect question. Hence, your verb is subjunctive, not sum es est, but sim sis sit. Whether it is able, this location, to receive a work. In other words, you have to be able to have the ability to build on that site and to sustain the work. Think of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. It was built on soil that was too soft, and so almost immediately in the 12th century, it began to tip over. And if we have not engineered it within my lifetime, it would have already have toppled over completely. But they have tried to obviously to stabilize it and keep it with that leaning because it is such a popular tourist attraction. But you have to have the right kind of soil. I brought up earlier as well of how it is nothing short of a miracle that there are so many skyscrapers in Chicago, because Chicago as a location is on soil that's like a sponge. It truly is, and so therefore they have to make all of these accommodations in order to be able to build these giant skyscrapers. But I will continue on. So it says, continuing, money, because that's always at the forefront of anything when you're making requests to the government, that money having been gathered up by us or with us taking care, in other words, we are being prudent, we are being fiscally responsible. So money for us or with us, taking care, that money having been collected, we do it via taxes. Think of a SPLOST, a special purpose optional, SPLOST, special purpose local optional sales tax. And that purpose is the most important thing. When you add an extra penny to the sales tax, that penny is what you have going towards whatever it is that is the specific thing that you're trying to build or develop or whatever it might be. Very often you also have a version of this which is an eSPLOST, which is an educational special purpose local optional sales tax if you need to build a new school or something like that. But nevertheless, here is their version of the SPLOST. Money having been collected with us taking care, or for us taking care, that money non deerit. Remember, de with sum esse is going to mean to be lacking. And he says here, which will be music to Trajan's ear, money will not be lacking if you, master, again addresses him in the vocative, if you approve of. Now, what we have here is a protasis, which remember is the if clause, in a future more vivid conditional. Because in the protasis of a future more vivid conditional, you can have either a future or what you have here, future perfect. And so therefore, that is your future perfect ending on the end of your perfect stem. And remember, the future more vivid translates if the subject verbs implied at some point in the future, then the next apodosis clause, then the subject, whether it's a new subject or the same subject, will verb. And so, money will not be lacking if you approve of, indulge, hoc genus, this type of work, both for the salubrity, which is the good health, and for the pleasantness of the colony. But what kind of colony? Very thirsty. And so therefore, adding on here, they really need this water source. Hopefully you will approve this construction of a new aqueduct, completely new. In the previous letter, they were using the old aqueduct parts. Here is something brand new. But I suspect it will be approved because they're going to fund it locally, which is going to be something very good. So, hopefully again, you are studying. Just to do it one more time. Money having been collected with us or for us, taking care, will not be lacking if you, O master, O emperor, approve this type of work, both for the health and for the pleasantness of that very thirsty colony, which of course, again, is Sinope. Keep studying and do well.